The case of Abril Perez. Abril Perez was born on November 18, 1971, in Monterrey, Mexico. She was the second of 3 children to parents Maria del Sacramento Saganon and Manuel Perez. Raised alongside her older brother Javier and younger sister Ana, the family lived modestly, but provided their children with a good education and motivated them to aspire to a better life. Abril excelled in school, showed a talent for mathematics and entrepreneurial skills, and dreamed of obtaining a high-quality higher education to secure a well-paying job with career advancement opportunities. After finishing high school, Abril was admitted to the most prestigious university in Nuevo Leon, where she earned a master's degree in finance and business administration. Upon graduating, she was hired in the sales department of one of the country's largest and fastest-growing companies. A few years later, she ventured into digital sales and quickly rose through the ranks, becoming the executive director of the company within 2 years. Abril was young, beautiful, successful, ambitious, and steadily advancing towards the life she had always dreamed of. She built a brilliant career, supported her family, and was full of plans for the future. However, her personal life remained unsettled, which disappointed her loved ones. Nevertheless, she was confident she would find true love and live a long, happy life. Little did Abril know how her marriage to the perfect man would turn out. Abril met Juan Carlos in the mid-1990s when her career was taking off. They were both ambitious, which created a strong connection between them. He was captivated by her beauty, charm, kindness, and intelligence, while she was drawn to his sharp intellect and determination. As their companies collaborated on projects, they crossed paths several times, eventually leading Juan Carlos to realize he was in love with Abril. Through mutual acquaintances, he obtained her phone number and asked her out on a date. The feelings were mutual and their relationship developed quickly. By 1998, they decided to formalize their relationship with a wedding. By then, they had both achieved considerable career success and were involved in developing online stores, which showed great promise. Their life resembled a true fairy tale, evoking envy and admiration among their peers. After 3 years of marriage, Abril gave birth to their first child, a daughter named Ana Cecilia. 2 years later, they had a son named Juan Carlos Jr., and another 2 years after that, they welcomed a third child, a boy named Julio Andres. Despite having 3 young children, Abril managed to balance her parental responsibilities with her career advancement, barely taking any maternity leave. From the outside, the Perez Sanchez family seemed perfect, wealthy, successful, and happy. However, appearances were deceiving. Behind closed doors, Juan Carlos showed his true nature, being hot-tempered, aggressive, and harsh. He was intolerant of compromise, insisting that everything had to be exactly as he wanted. Over time, his behavior worsened, and verbal altercations escalated into physical confrontations. After the birth of their first daughter, Juan Carlos briefly softened, trying to control his emotions. But it didn't last long. By the time the third child was born, he no longer even tried to be a good father or husband. He would vent his anger on Abril, insulting and belittling her, and her tears seemed to lift his spirits. He regularly physically harmed her, often in ways that left no visible marks on her body, so she could hide the bruises under clothing or mask them with makeup. All this was done to protect his flawless reputation and pride himself on being a model family man, loving husband and father. Abril kept silent for years, trying not to tell even her sister and mother about the ongoing nightmare. She earned well and could have raised the children on her own. But her husband was a wealthy and influential man who could easily take the children away from her through the courts. By 2010, the ideal family facade had begun to crumble, and those who once admired them started to suspect that something was terribly wrong behind closed doors. Abril was not just subdued, but deeply distressed, visibly thin, sleeping poorly, and frequently sporting bruises on her face and body that became increasingly difficult to conceal. In public, Juan Carlos maintained a calm and confident demeanor, pretending that nothing was amiss, playing the role of a loving and caring husband, interacting with his wife politely and affectionately. However, at home, he transformed into a monster, making it increasingly dangerous for Abril to be near him. Despite pleas from loved ones to divorce him, Abril stubbornly insisted that everything was fine and that she would handle the problems with her husband herself. In 2014, Juan Carlos's career reached its peak when he became the head of a major trading company, making him one of the most influential people in the field. After this promotion, the family moved to Mexico City, settling in a large house in one of the capital's best neighborhoods. Their children attended an elite private school, and Abril sincerely hoped that the move would positively affect their relationship. Contrary to expectations, the change only made Juan Carlos continue to physically harm and insult his wife, even doing so in front of their children. He began to groundlessly accuse her of infidelity, and whenever she tried to defend herself, he resorted to using his fists. He monitored her phone and emails, forbade her from using social media, and later even hired a private detective to follow her and photograph any men who came near her. Over the next 4 years, Abril tried everything to save her marriage, despite her husband's behavior becoming utterly unbearable. She lived in a never-ending nightmare that outwardly seemed like a happy and successful union, with many even envying her for having a prominent, influential, wealthy, and seemingly caring husband. In 2018, the Sanchez family traveled to Monterrey to celebrate Catholic Christmas with the Perez family. However, Juan Carlos behaved towards his wife as he was accustomed, not shying away from her parents, who were horrified by what they witnessed. At that moment, Abril realized things could not continue this way and informed her husband that she would file for divorce once they returned to Mexico City. Hearing this, Juan Carlos flew into a rage, grabbing her throat and squeezing so tightly that she nearly lost consciousness. Only her mother, Maria del Soro, entering the room and raising the alarm prevented a tragedy. When the family returned to their home in the capital, Abril prepared for divorce, moving from the marital bedroom to a small guest room. However, this did not save her from her tyrannical husband. On the morning of January 4th, while she was still asleep, Juan Carlos entered the bedroom holding a baseball bat, striking her hard on the head and attempting to swing again. Half awake, Abril barely understood what was happening, but managed to slip off the bed just in time, literally saving her own life. She began to scream, and the children ran into the room having heard the noise. The youngest son shielded his mother with his body while the eldest son took the bat from his father. Together, they fled the house and headed to the hospital, where doctors diagnosed Abril with a serious concussion and a deep laceration above her eyebrow, requiring stitches. As soon as his wife and sons left the home, Juan Carlos contacted his lawyer to explain the situation and asked for help in resolving it. He also posted on his social media page, claiming that his wife had betrayed him, was unfaithful and intended to leave him for another man, taking their children and attempting to take all their jointly acquired assets. Moreover, he claimed that his wife had stolen all the money from their home safe, and that when he tried to stop her, she injured him with a knife in the shoulder. As proof of his innocence, Sanchez shared photos of a bloody knife and stains on the floor, but these were later revealed to be fake. The blood was from Abril's own room, and the knife photo was taken from the internet. Despite this, his friends believed him and shared his story on social media, sparking widespread outrage. Meanwhile, Abril had filed a police report against Sanchez, accusing him of attempting to kill her. After being released from the hospital, she moved out of their home with their sons and was granted temporary custody. Their adult daughter, who was in college, also sided with her mother and condemned her father's behavior. Sanchez was ordered to pay a small amount of alimony to Abril and their sons, but he disagreed with the amount. He faced a potential prison sentence, but as an influential businessman, he was confident he would avoid punishment. Abril returned to her parents' home in Monterrey, where she filed for divorce and began offering online consultations to women in similar situations. She planned to open a center for psychological and legal assistance for victims of domestic violence. 8.5 months after the incident, Sanchez was finally arrested and charged with femicide, bodily harm, and attempted murder. He was jailed for over a month, but managed to appeal the pretrial detention decision and was released. During the trial, crucial evidence, including hospital photographs and medical records, was not presented. The judge deemed the testimonies of Abril and her sons insufficient and released Sanchez, stating that his actions did not pose a direct threat to Abril's life. Abril was shocked and frightened by the verdict, realizing that her ex-husband had used his connections to secure his release. She sent an official letter to the judge expressing fear for her life, but it had no impact. Immediately after being released, Sanchez began legal proceedings against Abril for custody of their sons, forcing her to return to Mexico City for court sessions. Abril arrived in Mexico City with her children on November 25th, fearing for their safety after a court session. As they drove to the airport, a motorcyclist stopped at a traffic light, pulled out a handgun, and fired twice at Abril, who was sitting in the front passenger seat. One bullet grazed their younger son, but none of the children were seriously hurt. Abril was rushed to the hospital, where doctors fought to save her life for over 6 hours. But unfortunately, she died that evening due to severe injuries and significant blood loss. Abril's family, convinced that her ex-husband Juan Carlos was behind the brutal act, urged authorities to arrest him. However, law enforcement stated that without identifying the shooter, it was difficult to discuss motives, and couldn't claim that it was a hitman sent by Sanchez. The case was not classified as femicide until further investigation, and Juan Carlos remained free. After Abril's death, her children were placed in the care of their maternal relatives, while their father, Juan Carlos Sanchez, prepared to fight for custody in court. Sanchez's soon-to-be ex-wife's sister wrote an angry social media post blaming him for the incident, but her page was quickly blocked and later deleted. Despite this, the family decided to draw public attention to the case. The attack on Abril, which occurred on a day dedicated to fighting gender-based violence, sparked widespread outrage. People began sharing numerous cases where men had attempted to kill women but were not punished. As a result, the General Prosecutor's Office launched a new investigation into Sanchez and instructed investigators to review the judge's decisions to release him. The judges involved in Sanchez's case were temporarily suspended and later removed from their positions. Mexican politician and women's rights defender Claudia Sheinbaum Parra confirmed that Abril's case had been reclassified as femicide and would be reinvestigated. The judges who had released Sanchez could face consequences for Abril's death if his guilt was proven. Sanchez posted on social media calling for the perpetrator of his ex-wife's death to be punished to the fullest extent of the law. However, his daughter Ana Cecilia left an angry comment, accusing her father of cruelty and sharing photos of her mother taken in the hospital after Sanchez had attacked her with a bat. Despite the media attention, Sanchez was initially left free under a restraining order, required to check in weekly at a police station. However, after he failed to appear, a warrant for his arrest was issued. He used his resources and connections to flee the country and enter the United States. Mexican authorities contacted Interpol reporting Sanchez as a fugitive accused of a serious crime, and he was declared wanted worldwide. An investigation was launched to find the hitman who killed Abril. Street camera footage revealed 2 cars following her vehicle as she left the courthouse with her children and lawyer. The motorcyclist who committed the crime was not alone, but received instructions from individuals in the cars. It took investigators several months to identify some of the participants, and 2 suspects were finally arrested on March 5, 2020. Surprisingly, they did not resist arrest and began cooperating with authorities, hoping to reduce their sentences. It was confirmed that Sanchez was the mastermind behind the crime, having paid a substantial sum to 7 individuals involved in the act. The first to be caught were the driver of one of the chase cars and the motorcyclist who fired the fatal shots. Juan Carlos, while in prison, had hired 2 experienced criminals to be his personal bodyguards. After they were released, he rehired them to find people to kill Abril, promising each a large sum of money if they succeeded. Once he had assembled a team, Juan Carlos paid them the promised money and gave them detailed instructions about Abril's route and vehicle. The toughest part was luring Abril to Mexico City, which he achieved by threatening to take her children if she didn't appear in court. Abril showed up in court as planned, but intended to return to Monterrey the same day. Juan Carlos knew this through his connections, but it wasn't until the end of October 2020 that 3 more people involved in the conspiracy were arrested on suspicion of drug distribution. It was later discovered that they were involved in Abril's murder. All the arrested individuals were part of Juan Maldonado's gang, known as Juan Balto, which had protected Sanchez while he was in prison. Maldonado agreed to help kill Abril in exchange for a large reward. He was arrested in November 2020 and began cooperating, confirming that Juan Carlos had hired people to kill Abril. With this new evidence, it was clear that Sanchez was both the client and organizer of the crime. His previous assault on Abril with a bat was reclassified as an attempted murder, leading the court to issue an arrest warrant for him on charges of femicide. By spring 2021, all the participants in the crime had been caught, except for Sanchez, who remained at large. The weapon used in the murder was also found. In total, 9 people from the same criminal group were detained, 7 of whom were directly involved in chasing and shooting Abril. 5 years after Abril's death, Sanchez, the mastermind of the crime, is still on the run, and his whereabouts remain unknown. The person who pulled the trigger was sentenced to 52 years in prison, while 2 others involved in the crime received 50-year sentences each. The other participants are still under investigation, and their fate has yet to be decided. Today's case takes us to Setagaya, Tokyo. Setagaya is a serene suburban-style residential community. It is located not far from central Tokyo. It is made up of cultural amenities like art museums, libraries, and many parks. Setagaya is also renowned for having a large number of upscale residential areas. The city is popular with young people and filled with trendy coffee shops, adorable bookstores, and student pubs. The Miyazawa family was a joyful family of 4 who resided in Setagaya. They were a quiet, typical suburban family. In December of 2000, the Miyazawa family had planned to spend New Year's Eve at home, enjoying a quiet evening, cooking a special meal and anticipating the coming year. Mikio, the father and the head of the family, was a 44-year-old businessman who worked in corporate identity development for Interbrand, a London-based international media and marketing company with branches in 19 cities around the world. Since it was a remote job, Mikio worked from home and had a private study on the ground floor, which he used as his office. Yasuko, his wife, was 41 years old and was a popular teacher who enjoyed her job and was well respected by her students, their parents, and her coworkers. Mikio and Yasuko had 2 children named Nina and Rei. Nina was their 8-year-old daughter and Rei, their son, who had speech defect, was just 6 years old at the time of their murder. The Miyazawa family occupied a duplex, a sizable house that had been divided in 2. The other half of the house at the time was being resided by Yasuko's mother, Ashawi Jino. The duplex was close to Sashigaya Park, which has walking paths, sports fields, a children's playground. After settling into their house in 1990, the Miyazawa family fell in love with the lifestyle it provided. However, a few years later, the government decided to turn the area into a park for recreation and purchased all the nearby homes to make room for the project. The government already bought around 200 homes, but the Miyazawa family was one of just 3 households that were still in the area in December 2000. At the time, the area looks deserted, and according to reports, the Miyazawa family planned to move out the following year, in 2001. Even though there weren't many people living in the area anymore, the skate park at Sashigaya Park next to their house grew increasingly busy. Even outside their home, Mikio had to reprimand some rowdy teenagers for disturbing them. Additionally, he confronted Bazooka biker gang members for being too loud. He was obviously very stressed due to the inrush of people. At the time of the murder, the older sister of Yasuko was in Japan with her husband, eager to spend the new year with her family, even though she worked and resided in the UK. They stayed with their mother next door to Yasuko and her family throughout the visit. Around 10 a.m. on the December 31st, 2000, Yasuko's mother, Asahi, attempted to call the Miyazawa residence, but the call was unsuccessful. Despite the fact that they shared a door, they respected each other's privacy and never paid a surprise visit. Asahi made several calls in an attempt to get through to her daughter and her family, but nobody would pick up. According to her, they very rarely ignored calls. She then made the decision to go around and check on them. She noticed their car in the driveway, but when she knocked, no one answered the door. She then attempted to enter the house, but the door was locked. She returned to her residence to get her own key, before returning to let herself in. What she discovered was a gruesome scene. The entire family had been brutally murdered in a horrific way. Firstly, she discovered the body of her son-in-law, Mikio, on the floor. He appeared to have fallen down the stairs, based on the position of his body and the multiple stab wounds on his neck. The terrified grandmother hurried upstairs to find her daughter and grandchildren. At the top of the stairs, she discovered Yasuko and Nina dead, lying in their own pool of blood. Both had been repeatedly and savagely stabbed. Yasuko's mother ran to her grandson's room in the hopes of finding him alive, but he was also dead, strangled in his bed. It was truly a traumatizing scene to witness. Asahi was terrified and confused at the same time. She frantically dialed the police's number, pleading with them to arrive as soon as possible. The house was in a mess when the police arrived at the crime scene. There were numerous documents lying around, and it appeared that someone had slept on the couch in the living room. A chest of drawers with each drawer open and papers sticking out of them was located behind Mikio's body. Investigators discovered a missing drawer in the bathroom with all of its contents in the bathtub. They also found garbage and bloodied bandages in the bathtub, which was an odd collection of items to throw in a tub. Police discovered 150,000 yen in cash as well as foreign currency worth 5,000 yen in Mikio's study. The only thing missing was Mikio's old jacket. It's possible that the murderer fled the scene wearing Mikio's jacket because he left behind his bloody clothes. Nothing else was missing, so robbery could not have been the reason for the killings since nothing else was missing. Police discovered a screen that had been cut and taken out of a window in the second-floor bathroom while searching through the entire duplex. The bathroom was located towards the back of the house and could be reached from the fence between the property and the park. In light of the fact that all other doors and windows were locked and closed, this appeared to be the most likely point of entry. Footprints on the wall below the window were visible from the outside as well. As you walk from the bathroom, the kids' bedroom was the first room on the right. According to the police, Ray was sleeping in the room on the bunk bed he shared with his sister when the killer entered and strangled the child to death. Most likely noticing movement upstairs, Mikio went to see if his son was all right. He was pushed down the stairs after being stabbed with a sashimi knife at the top of the stairs. The next victim was young Nina. The murderer discovered her in bed with her mother on the third floor, which could only be accessed by a drop ladder. He attacked her but stopped midway through the attack when he realized that the sashimi knife's tip had come off while he was attacking Mikio. Yasuko and Nina likely believed the attacker had left at this point, so they descended the ladder to the spot where Mikio was attacked. Yasuko did her best to save her daughter by going to get the first aid kit. However, the murderer was not finished. He returned with one of their kitchen knives and discovered them at the top of the stairs, where he killed both mother and daughter. Yasuko and Nina sustained the most brutal assaults out of the 4 murders. According to forensics, after they both were already dead, their attacker kept stabbing them repeatedly. Yasuko was said to have made a valiant effort to fight off the attacker, desperately trying to protect her daughter from him, as evident by the wounds on her body. However, the killer was unfazed and saw that the job was completed. The perpetrator cut his hand during the attack and bandaged it with supplies from the family's first aid kit. In order to stop the bleeding, he had also used sanitary pads he discovered in the restroom. After he was done with his heinous crime, the killer comfortably remained in the house, which had been a happy family home just hours earlier. He drank some barley tea and ate some melon and ice cream from their refrigerator. He slept on their couch, used their toilet without flushing, and unplugged their phone. He also attempted to use Mikio's credit card to purchase theater tickets at 1:18 a.m. after logging onto the family computer. However, he did not finish the transaction because he lacked all the necessary security details. He went on to set up browser bookmarks for the websites of the business Mikio worked for and the institution Yasuko worked for as well. The police discovered activity on the computer at 10 a.m. on the morning of December 31st. Though it wasn't clear if the killer stayed online all night or if he logged in again the following morning. Police believed they could not rule out the possibility that Ashi accidentally touched the computer when she entered the house at 10:55 a.m. Chances are, if it wasn't her, Then the murderer had already left before she arrived. The murder weapon, the sashimi knife, and the kitchen knife were both left on the kitchen table before the killer left. At the crime scene, there was a ton of forensic evidence. Nina's blood and the murderer's blood were found on the first aid kit. Additionally, the killer had failed to flush the toilet and left feces floating in it. He left his hit bag behind. It contained sand that could be traced to the United States. The detectives were able to follow the sand traces all the way to a particular spot. It landed them at the vicinity of Nevada's Edwards Air Force Base. Also, a roll of tape, which skateboarders frequently used to fix their boards, was found in the hip bag. Lastly, the hip bag contained a folded iron handkerchief with traces of French cologne that was popular among skaters then. There were numerous footprints all over the house, which offered intriguing hints. The perpetrator was wearing Slazenger shoes, but they were never sold in Japan. In the exact size he was wearing. That size was in fact only available in South Korea. He had gloves, but he didn't use them because his prints were all over the place. Actually, forensic experts were able to extract a full set of fingerprints from material evidence discovered around the house. He also abandoned his blood-stained clothing. His clothes, however, were left at the scene neatly folded. In contrast to the way he left the drawers, documents, and ice cream cups. Unlike the soft water in Japan, the clothes had been washed in hard water with a higher mineral content. The water used was typical in Korea, though. The purchase of the sweater the killer wore and the knife he used was tracked by the police to the Kanagawa prefecture. Only 130 of the identical sweaters were ever sold, but only 12 of the owners could be located by police. So, if the sweater was bought in Japan but washed in Korea, could it be that the murderer resided in Japan but visited Korea before the killings? Maybe the sweater hadn't been washed in Japan since he bought it because it was made in Korea? The blood found at the scene of the crime was used to create a genetic profile, which revealed that the unidentified suspect was mixed race. The killer's father was East Asian, while his mother was of Southern European ancestry. DNA revealed a unique gene sequence that can only be found in people of Chinese, Korean, or Japanese ancestry. 1 in 5 men of Korean descent, 1 in 10 Chinese men, and 1 in 13 Japanese men fit this type of profile. Detectives believed the theory that the murderer was a foreigner. Accepting that such a monster was not from your country was simpler. Despite sending investigators to Korea to work with local law enforcement on the case, the Korean government was unable to assist in identifying the murderer. In recent years, the idea that the murderer was Korean has gained popularity. The likelihood that the murderer was Japanese was only 1 in 13. He might also have been a Korean Japanese of the first or second generation. The Korean expat community and the diplomatic community were among the areas of Japan where investigators searched for a person of mixed race. Perhaps the maternal European connection could have offered some information. However, neither the killer's DNA nor fingerprints could be found on anyone. Police questioned whether the murderer might have been a member of the military due to the source of the sand in the hip bag. Could he have been a second-generation Korean Japanese or Chinese American citizen? Given that U.S. forces have been stationed in Japan since the end of World War II, despite the abundance of evidence, police were unable to identify the murderer. In an effort to identify anyone who might have had a reason to kill the Miyazawa family, they went back to the investigative board and looked at their connections and relatives. However, the victims' loved ones and friends had no idea who would want to murder them. They were well liked by the locals and had no known enemies. At the nearby skate park, Mikio warned skaters for being too loud, and that was it. It undoubtedly wasn't a good enough excuse to brutally murder a man and his family. According to forensic evidence found in the killer's faces that were left in the toilet, he had consumed sesame seeds and string beans, a dish that is very popular in Japan and is typically made at home. This must have been consumed by the murderer prior to the killings because it was not consumed at the Miyazawa residence. Police took into account the possibility that the killer still resided with his mother. A timeline of the incidents leading up to the terrible night was created by the investigators. There were numerous reports of animals being killed and dismembered in the park next to the family's residence, just 6 months prior to the murders. In August 2000, locals discovered that a cat had been skinned. Police were able to identify the perpetrator of the animal abuse later on in the investigation. He worked as a bank clerk, and his actions had nothing to do with the murders of the Miyazawa family. Few days before the murders, Yasuko had informed her father-in-law on December 25th that a strange car occasionally parked in front of their home. A car had no business being there because the park's entrance was on the other side of the fence. They also discovered a strange man wandering around the house 2 days later. Local residents claimed to have seen a strange man on December 29th wandering through the neighborhood shops. He was dressed in skater gear and was in his late 30s or early 40s. They noticed that he was wearing the same clothes that were discovered at the crime scene. This seemed strange, especially given the season. He did not appear to be dressed warmly enough. According to one of the shop owners, the man purchased a sashimi knife, which was the only knife sold that day. Strangely, the forensics identified the knife as the same knife the killer had used. A neighbor of the Miyazawa family saw the same man walking around their house again the following day. Everyone had left the house to go shopping, so nobody was home. The witness described the unknown person in detail, telling police that he was wearing a gray wool hat with a black stripe. He was wearing gloves, a long-sleeved t-shirt, a hip bag, a colorful scarf, a black Uniqlo jacket, and white Slazenger shoes. After the killings, the majority of these items were discovered in the Miyazawa residence. On the evening of December 30th, Yasuko called her mother at 7 o'clock to let her know that they had just returned home. Her mother then asked if the children were interested in coming over to watch television. Nina, the older child, loved the idea, while Riai preferred to stay at home. Nina spent a few hours with her grandmother next door before leaving between 9 and 9:30 p.m. to go to bed. The family computer was used for the last known activity in the Miyazawa residence at 10:38 p.m. Mikio opened a work email that was password protected. He is the only person who is likely to have known the password to open the email. A neighbor overheard a fight inside the Miyazawa's house at 11 o'clock while he was taking a stroll in the park. It sounded more like a husband and wife arguing than like a physical altercation. A loud thud was heard in the other half of the building next door. Around 11:30 p.m. by Asahi and Yasuko's sister, they were both watching television while still awake. Another witness observed a man leaving the house quickly around the same time. When Asahi arrived after 10 a.m. the following morning, she reported to the police that the light on the ground floor and in the entrance hallway was on. However, the light, according to a paperboy who delivered papers at the Miyazawa's doorstep on the morning of 31st, was not on. A taxi driver came forward after the murder and admitted to the police that he had picked up 3 middle-aged men close to the Miyazawa family home. According to him, the silence in the car was unsettling, almost too quiet. The driver said there was blood on the back seat when they exited and one of the men was hurt. Another tip came in again soon after. A young man visited a clinic on December 31st, about 70 miles north of the Miyazawa family home. His hand had been cut so deeply that his bone was exposed. Medical personnel were treating the wound. The man was described by staff as being very composed and not showing much concern for his injury. Given how serious the wound was, they thought his behavior was odd. The man was described as being in his 30s, wearing a black down jacket and jeans. He left the center without giving any information, not even a name or an address. Only later in the investigation was this tip determined to be significant. Police initially believed that the murderer had left the scene in the middle of the night, but after processing the crime scene and receiving the results of the blood tests, they came to the conclusion that he had actually left in the morning, just before Asahi arrived. Numerous months had passed by the time the data from the medical center was analyzed and police were still without any leads on the man. In 2018, Tokyo police made information about their suspect public in the hopes that someone would be able to assist in prosecuting him. The information determined that the perpetrator was a young man between the ages of 15 and 20, based on all the evidence discovered at the crime scene. He stands at 170 centimeters tall, and they were able to determine that he is right-handed by looking at the victim's knife wounds. He might have been a drifter or an undocumented immigrant, which would account for why he was impossible to find. The police speculated that the murderer might have been the son of a diplomat, a soldier, or the son of a wealthy local family who may have been one of the skaters who fought with Mikio in the months before the killings because it was determined that he was younger than 30 to 40 years old. 250,000 police officers worked on the case in the months following the murders. In Japan, violent home invasions are extremely uncommon, so authorities were determined to apprehend the murderer. Police were never able to identify the murderer, despite all the available evidence. 40 officers are still working the case today, reviewing case files and repeating witness interviews. They frequently distribute flyers with details about the killer's attire and appearance at train stations close to the Miyazawa's residence in the hopes that someone will come forward with fresh information. Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department has offered a 20 million yen reward to anyone who can assist them in solving this 23-year-old mystery. Every year, police gather at the Miyazawa home to pay their respects to the family and make a commitment to never give up on the effort to find their killer. The house is now a family mausoleum for the Miyazawas, boarded up and vacant. The building was recently targeted for demolition by the local council, but the family refused to let that happen. This is such a sad case. It's disturbing how the police haven't still found the perpetrator, even with all the evidence at hand. Friends, what do you think about this case? Please share your ideas and theories about this case with me in the comments. I would love to hear them. Blake Leibel was born in Toronto, Ontario, Canada on the 8th of May in 1981. His family was a well-off family right up the tree. His father, Laurel Mitchell, is well-known real estate tycoon and Canadian Motorsport Hall of Famer, while Blake's mother, Eleanor Chettle, inherited Alraz products from her father, Paul Chettle. This company makes plastic polytart materials and is reported to generate over $28 million in sales annually. But while grandfather Paul Chettle was a success, it was reported that he was known to be a control freak and bully. Paul's wife, Blake's grandmother, suffered from a severe mental illness of some kind. The specific diagnosis remains unknown, but what is known is that when Paul Chettle passed away, he left a will behind that withheld inheritance from his family, pending not only alcohol and drug screening, but also an HIV test. Once relatives successfully passed these stipulations, Paul Chettel's girlfriend would get 2 Mercedes-Benz cars, a Cadillac and some other parting gifts, while Blake's mother got a payout of $12 million. Oddly enough, Blake's brother Cody Leibel was cut out of the will, with Paul Chettel stating that it wasn't out of lack of love, but rather that he knew Cody's father would adequately provide for him. On the other side of the family, Blake and Cody's father, Laurel Mitchell, was a man who dated beautiful young women and took them out in fancy Ferraris. He was the envy of any man who set eyes on his fortunes or female companions. When Laurel Mitchell split up with Eleanor Chettle, Blake lived with his mom while Cody lived with his dad. It was during this time that Blake and his father reportedly became distant and estranged, as Blake felt that Laurel wasn't providing enough for him financially. Even so, the Leibel family was, by all accounts, a highly successful one. Even Blake's grandfather Stanley Leibel was a well-known sailor who competed in the 1968 Summer Olympics and then later developed hundreds of homes across Toronto. Even Blake's aunt, Terry Leibel, is a Canadian journalist who served as a host for CBC's Olympic coverage during the 1996, 2002, 2004, and 2006 games. Blake and his brother Cody Leibel were destined for success right from the very start. Or at least they certainly had the financial environment around them to allow them to succeed at whatever they put their minds to. As a matter of fact, when Cody Leibel moved to California, he certainly left his mark of success on the world. He even sold his 5,500 square foot home in Beverly Crest for almost $18 million in 2017. The buyer was reportedly Katy Perry. Then later on the same year, Cody bought Reba McEntire's house for a reported $25 million, crowning him the youngest homeowner in Beverly Park history. This move made him neighbors with big names like Sylvester Stallone, Mark Wahlberg, Denzel Washington, and even Eddie Murphy. As the world's youngest owner of a Ferrari Enzo, Cody not only owned a record label, but he was a regular at a poker club called Molly's Game that reportedly hosted famous faces like Leonardo DiCaprio, Ben Affleck, Matt Damon, and Tobey Maguire. Cody Leibel certainly seemed as successful as the family that raised him. Cody's brother, Blake Leibel, moved to California in 2004. He reportedly still received an allowance from his mother that totaled close to $2 million in just 8 years. In 2011, Blake's mother Eleanor would die of brain cancer, leaving a huge inheritance behind to Blake and Cody. Roughly 2 years later, Blake challenged his mother's will to remove his father as trustee and deny his brother Cody his inheritance. But Blake, who reportedly didn't even attend his mother's funeral, received little sympathy from the courts. But who is Blake Leibel? He wrote and directed a comedy film in 2009 called Bold. It was very low budget and it didn't hit well at all. The movie was a massive flop with a 2.6-star rating on IMDb, but apparently you can still find it on Plex TV if you're curious. Blake Leibel also directed a 2013 film called Soulmates. He's even listed as a creative consultant and director on a few episodes of Mel Brooks' Spaceballs, the animate. In 2010, Blake published a graphic novel called Syndrome. The novel was about a man named Dr. Chettle, who happens to share the same name as Blake's own mother. In the novel, Dr. Chettle studies serial killers. He also goes as far as to recruit a town full of actors and then set up a fake Truman Show-style scenario. Next, he fakes the execution of a serial killer before wiping his mind and allowing the memoryless man to run free in the fake town, so Chettle can monitor his actions. The doctor's goal in the book is to cure serial killers. Chettel's character can be quoted saying that evil is not some mysterious force, evil is a syndrome. Co-author of the book, Ryan Roberts, stated that Blake told him that he had done a lot of research on serial killers. Ryan also recalled how Leibel jerked his hands upward when showing how a victim could be flipped upside down in order to drain them of fluid. In hindsight, Ryan Roberts said he'll never forget that. While Blake didn't actually write or illustrate the final edition of Syndrome, he was credited as creator of the book, and he wrote an introduction at the start of the novel, asking the question, if you loved hurting things, what would you do? Syndrome, Blake's biggest success, and it ended up with him giving away stacks of the graphic novels for free at Comic-Con in San Diego. A producer said Blake wanted to be a respected comic book artist, and he used his cash to try and buy that image. He tried hard to come across as cool and edgy, but it was clear to everyone that Blake Leibel had some serious mental issues that he needed to address. His mental state had begun to deteriorate, and he was spiraling into a dark abyss. Those close to him had started to recognize the signs, but none could foresee the depths to which Blake would ultimately sink until it was beyond anyone's reach to save him. Blake Leibel had quite the romantic life. In 2006, Blake met a Californian model named Amanda Braun. Amanda was previously in a relationship with Andrew Alchek, who died in prison following convictions for crimes committed as a crooked hedge fund manager. After 5 years of dating, Blake and Amanda finally tied the knot in 2011. Not long after the wedding, Amanda Braun Leibel gave birth to a son. While the couple appeared to live comfortably in their Beverly Hills mansion, Blake continued to cash in and spend his checks pretty much as quickly as he received them. He reportedly smoked weed constantly and came up with various plans for success, but none of his ideas proved fruitful. During this time, one of Leibel's friends said Blake was developing a dark obsession with brutal violence. It was like Blake was becoming a different person. He was distant and paranoid. Then in the summer of 2015, Blake left Amanda while she was pregnant with their second child. This was reportedly due to his pot-smoking habit consuming his life. But I'd say there was more than a marijuana issue brewing. Blake began isolating from almost everyone as he sank deeper into a world filled with gore, violence, and darkness. He even stopped returning his family's calls and began to suspect that his brother Cody was in deep debt, some Russian gang members, and he was worried it could potentially bring harm back his way. But there was never any evidence that Cody Leibel owed any major debt like that, and no one could understand why Blake's sanity was spiraling out of control. But most of his friends claimed it was initially the death of his mother that brought on this dark madness. Eleanor Chettle's $5.5 million home in Toronto, plus the millions of other dollars acquired due to her death, just wasn't enough for Blake. He was broke, and when he failed to have his mother's will overturned in 2013, he turned to his father to help him pay for his mounting credit card debts. Then Blake was sued by his lawyers for non-payment in the unsuccessful case of Eleanor Chettle's will. After Blake split up with Amanda, he began pitching another original script called Psychopump. It was about a caped vigilante that cuts off the heads of villains and then uploads his antics to YouTube. But reviewers of the script stated that it was terrible in every way possible. There wasn't one thing about Blake Leibel's new project that anyone liked. It was likened to a bad rip-off version of Batman, where Batman is violent, psychotic, stupid, sadistic, and highly unlikable. Psychopomp was nothing more than a gratuitously violent film, devoid of any imaginative flair. However, there were whispers that Hilary Shore, a producer involved in Children of Men, had expressed interest in the Psychopomp screenplay. Yet, this supposed development never materialized. While married to a pregnant Amanda Braun, Blake had started seeing Iana Kashin, a stunning 30-year-old Ukrainian former attorney from Kiev. In no time, Blake got her pregnant too, and for a while they seemed happy and healthy, as Blake pulled Iana into his fantasy world of Hollywood hot pink. All the while, his mental decline was picking up speed at a volatile pace. In May of 2016, Iana gave birth to a baby girl named Diana, and to outside observers, the new family appeared to be doing well. However, the reality was far from idyllic. Blake harbored intense jealousy towards the infant, as a storm of anger raged within him. No longer the sole object of Iana's affection, Blake found himself replaced by baby Diana, pushing him to new heights of psychological instability. He incessantly demanded sexual attention from Iana, threatening to abandon her for another woman if she refused his advances. In an attempt to salvage their relationship, Iana sent her newborn daughter to live with her mother in a nearby apartment, which Blake financially supported. Then, on the 20th of May, Blake Leibel was arrested for sexual assault not far from his condo. The alleged victim was Blake's third girlfriend, Constance Bucafori. She'd been living in another house he owned that was also a couple of miles away from his West Hollywood apartment where he lived with Iana. Constance claimed Blake forced himself on her in the house. Bucafori is known for being a storyboard artist on Aquaman and working in the art department for films like Snow White and The Huntsman, P.S. I Love You, and The Emoji Movie. Blake Leibel was released from custody around 15 hours after he was arrested, following a bail payment of $100,000. Iana had bailed Blake out of jail, but finding out about the affair with Constance was the final straw for her. She moved into her mother Olga Kasiansma. There was only one door left to check, and it was locked. The cops tried to force the door open to the bedroom, but a mattress was barricading the door from the other side. The cock shouted for whoever was in there to come out. And that's when Blake's voice finally responded, saying he wasn't going to come out because he was scared that the officers were going to beat him up. They assured him that this wouldn't happen and that they were just there to check on his girlfriend to make sure she was okay. Blake replied back that she was fine. He said she was at the hospital and gave them a room number. He also said that his father would be there soon and that he wasn't coming out until then. Blake was referring to his accountant and mentor, Stephen Green. Blake had called Stephen around noon and asked him to come to the apartment. For a month before Stephen Green received that call, he had been unable to get in contact with Blake Leibel. Green had called, messaged, left voicemails, and even emailed Blake several times. He never got a reply. Stephen Green even left a voicemail on Blake's phone stating that he was worried about him and that he loved him. He said whatever was going on, he wanted to help him get through it. But as you're about to find out, it was way too late for that. When Green arrived at the condo, he spoke to Blake through the partially open bedroom door in the apartment. A short while later, a detective arrived on the scene to find Green now in the living room talking to Blake on the phone. Leibel was still barricaded in the master bedroom. When Green hung up the phone, the detective asked him to call Blake back, which he did. After a few minutes of conversation, Blake Leibel finally agreed to come out. He was only wearing boxer shorts when he emerged from the room. Stephen Green gave Blake some clothing to put on. Luckily, officers checked the clothing first and found Leibel's passport and about $4,000 in cash. They thought that he was going to try and make a break for it, but that never happened. As the officers entered the bedroom, one of them screamed, "She's on the bed." The detective immediately ordered everyone to go outside, and he called in the paramedics who were waiting on standby. Sadly, Yana Kasyan was pronounced dead at 1:02 p.m. on May 26th. Yana Kasyan's naked body was lying on a clean sheet and was covered by a red Mickey Mouse blanket on top of a blue polka dot blanket. Her head was on a pillow. There were abrasions and bruising on the left side of Kasyan's face, consistent with blunt force trauma. There were human bite marks on Kasyan's left jaw and left bicep, as well as fingernail marks under her jawline. Her scalp had been removed from around her eyebrows to the hairline. On the back of her head, a large portion of skin on the right side of her face had also been removed. The skull bone was visible. There were cuts across her lower forehead, below the eyebrows. There was also a cut on the right side of her face, from her cheek to her jawline, and another on the left side of her face, toward where the ear should have been, but it was missing. The medical examiner later proposed that a sharp-bladed tool had been used to cut off the skin, but he also noted that some facial tissue had been ripped away by hand. Considering the extensive damage to Jana's face and skull, combined with the challenging nature of both cutting and tearing the tissue, the doctor believed that inflicting these injuries would have been a lengthy process. Moreover, the presence of inflammation in the tissue and bleeding from several severed samples led to the tragic conclusion that Yana Kasyan was still alive while enduring this prolonged torture. The examiner also determined that there was no blood in Yana's heart, veins, or arteries. Half of Yana's blood supply was missing. This is highly unusual, even considering the weight of her injuries. Gravity wouldn't have been enough to drain that much blood from her body. Her heart would have had to have been pumping the entire time. It was the medical examiner's opinion that Blake may have drained Yana's blood by placing her in the bathtub with her head lower than her feet and then running water over her head, which could have increased the blood flow and potentially interfere with clotting. Due to the presence of foam in her nostrils, the doctor concluded that Yana was probably submerged in water for at least 30 minutes. Her body was then washed and placed on the clean sheet. Her cause of death was ruled as exsanguination, which is the draining of blood. There was an additional pillow to the left of Yana, with an indentation on it. It was as if someone had been laying next to her. There were dried blood stains on the mattress beneath the sheet she lay upon. The investigation uncovered the extent of the violence that had occurred throughout Blake Leibel's condo. According to court documents, blood stains and pieces of human flesh were discovered behind the bed. Blood was also splattered on the wall near Jana's body. A fragment of an eyebrow was found on the floor beside the bed. In addition to the mattress Jana was lying on, blood stains were present on another mattress from a second bed in the room, as well as on a side table and in various other areas of the bedroom. The mattress that had been used to obstruct the door belonged to the second bed. Clump of hair and a blood-stained razor were found in the trash can. When cops entered the bathroom of the master bedroom, warm water was running in the bathtub. Blood stains and hair could be seen in the tub. A green paring knife with blood on it was found in the top drawer in the bathroom. The oval shape of the bloodstains found on the headboard of the bed and the guest bedroom were consistent with having been made via the top of Yana's scalped head. There was blood on 2 towels, a pillowcase, the floor, and the base of the drapes in the guest bedroom. The drain in the tub of the guest bathroom also tested positive for blood. The same drain contained some freshly cut hair. Chemical testing also confirmed the presence of blood that someone had tried to clean up in areas of the dining room, the hallway, the guest bathroom, and both of the bedrooms. The kitchen garbage disposal also tested positive for blood. Then more evidence was found in the dumpster. Inside trash bags that had been thrown down the garbage chute, mere feet from Blake's condo door, investigators found blood-stained bedding, towels, clothing, bath mats, placemats, a bed skirt with bloody handprints, human tissue, including some pieces with hair that appeared to be scalp, and the missing ear. Samples taken from Blake's hand and fingernails also contained Yana's DNA. Yana's hands showed signs of injury consistent with self-defense. The marks and bruises seen on Blake's face when arrested were most likely inflicted by Yana fighting for her life. The LA coroner concluded that she was kept alive for around 8 hours. He said he'd never seen injuries like that, and he likened them to wartime injuries. Blake Leibel was arrested and charged with the torture and murder of Yana Kasyan. It was later discovered that he used her phone to order food to the apartment via Postmates twice during the time Yana was missing. Blake's demeanor on the scene was described as ice cold. He acted as if he didn't even know Yana was dead. When an officer told him, he simply replied, "Well, I guess you'll find out who did it then." Leibel donned an evil grin as officers led him away from the condo in handcuffs. On June 26, 2018, Blake Leibel was sentenced to life without parole. Due to the nature of his crimes, he was eligible for the death penalty, but the DA didn't pursue it, even though doctors deemed Blake not to be insane and stated he was fit to stand trial. It took the jury just 3 hours to deliver a guilty verdict. Blake was also ordered to pay about $43 million to Yanakassian's family. Cody Leibel was present on every day of the trial. Blake's father never showed up. Yanakassian had only been living in the United States for a couple of years before tragedy struck. She was working on becoming a translator. What happened to her was absolutely devastating. It was a crime with little motive outside of Blake's narcissistic desire to control women with his allowance. It was as if this aged, evil little boy had never been rejected. And once he was, or rather felt like he was, he couldn't take it. His ego collapsed, and he snatched away the life of his newborn daughter's beautiful mother in the cruelest way possible. Blake Leibel will rot in prison where he belongs, alone with no one, nothing, and no future that will lead to any shedding of light in his direction. This case started on a freezing Saturday night in December 1991 in Austin, Texas. Two 17-year-old girls named Eliza Thomas and Jennifer Harbison were co-workers at the I Can't Believe It's yogurt store at the North Cross Mall. It was almost 11 o'clock at night and their shift was about to end. A little bit after 10 o'clock, Jennifer's sister, 15-year-old Sarah Harbison, and her friend 13-year-old Amy Ayers were hanging around the store. They were waiting for the girls' shift to end since the four of them were going to a slumber party together that night. To avoid being late to the party, Sarah and Amy entered the store to assist Eliza and Jennifer close up in time. However, when the clock struck 12 o'clock, Officer Troy Gay of the Austin Police Department was on patrol that evening when he saw smoke coming from the yogurt store. Firefighters quickly arrived on the scene after the officer called in. They soon discovered a horrifying scene while putting out the fire. In the store, the lifeless bodies of Jennifer, Sarah, Amy, and Eliza were strewn across the floor. It was obvious that they had been ruthlessly murdered. The teenagers were all bound and gagged in their own clothes while completely naked. Jennifer, Sarah, and Eliza were found in the rear of the back room, huddled into one corner while Amy's body was recovered in the middle of the back room. Sarah and Eliza were piled on top of one another and Jennifer was lying nearby. The girls' legs were wide open and one of them had an ice cream scoop tucked in between it. The killer or killers had gathered napkins and other combustible materials from about the shop, doused the victims with lighter fluid, and then set the place on fire before escaping, leaving their bodies almost completely burnt beyond recognition. Their autopsy results revealed that they had all been shot execution style in the back of the heads. Additionally, 2 or more of the girls had experienced sexual assault. Authorities also disclosed to the media that 2 firearms had been used in the killings, raising the possibility of at least 2 killers. Police investigators and the management of the yogurt shop determined that $540 or so was taken from the shop. It was unclear if the girls had been targeted particularly because someone knew they would be alone inside the store that night, or if the intended purpose had been a robbery and the culprit had then recognized a chance to take advantage of them. Lead Detective John Jones and his partner, Mike Huckabee, launched an immediate investigation into the case. There were several problems with the investigation right away. First of all, the firefighters who responded to the crime scene did their jobs, but ultimately washed away important forensic evidence in the process. Furthermore, the city of Austin had only one fingerprint unit at the beginning of the 1990s, which lacked forensic expertise. Additionally, there was only one homicide investigator working the shift the night of the murders due to the limited number of the city's homicide squad. Despite the police department's shortcomings, Detectives Jones and Huckabee had quite a large number of suspects. The police station's phones were ringing nonstop as tips poured in. When faced with 342 suspects and scores of fake confessions, the investigators became overwhelmed. The investigators started by looking into possible local serial killers. due to the graphic nature of the crime and the staging of the teenagers' bodies. This led them to Kenneth Allen McDuff. Kenneth Allen McDuff was a Texas serial killer who is thought to have committed at least 14 murders. On August 6, 1966, he was found guilty of killing 3 teenagers named Robert Brand, Mark Dunman, and Edna Louise Sullivan. These killings were known as the broomstick murders, because Edna's neck was broken like a broomstick after she had been sexually abused numerous times. For his crimes, Kenneth Allen McDuff was given a death sentence, but in 1972, the U.S. Supreme Court decided to end the death penalty in a 5-4 ruling, and his sentence was altered to life in prison with the chance of parole. He was granted parole in 1989 as a result of prison overpopulation. It is believed that Kenneth Allen McDuff further committed numerous killings upon his parole, including the 1992 slaying of Melissa and Northrop, a 22-year-old Texan. After many years of eluding authorities, McDuff was ultimately apprehended and put on death row. On November 17, 1998, the day before he was put to death, he admitted to killing the 4 teenagers at the yogurt store. He was foolish if he believed that making this last-minute confession would save his life. That day, as planned, he was put to death. Detectives looked into McDuff's confession, but disregarded him when fingerprints and hair taken from the yogurt store could not be used to identify him as the killer. About 8 days after the brutal killing of the girls, investigators received a tip to look into a teenager named Maurice Pierce. Maurice Pierce was a 16-year-old boy who was spotted with a gun that night at the North Cross Mall, where Sarah and Amy were hanging out before going to the yogurt store. The weapon was a handgun with a .22 caliber, the same caliber as one of the weapons used to kill the girls. However, nothing came out from the lead when Detectives Jones and Huckabee questioned Pierce, along with his 3 friends who accompanied him to the mall. Ballistics analysis of Maurice Pierce's gun revealed that it did not match the murder weapon. Additionally, just like with McDuff, none of the 4 suspects were identified by the fingerprints and hair samples taken from the crime site. The detectives eventually moved on from this. The case was given to new detectives after years went by without any arrests. Then in 1999, Forrest Wellborn, Michael Scott, Robert Springsteen, and Maurice Pierce, the 4 earlier suspects now in their 20s, were apprehended for the killings at the yogurt store. These were the same suspects who had been questioned 8 days prior to the girls' deaths and had been let go due to a lack of evidence. Michael Scott, one of the suspects, admitted to the murders. He wasn't alone, though. Robert Springsteen also admitted to killing the girls and raping one of them. The police were sure they had their killers after these confessions. According to the theory, the 4 boys had intended to rob the yogurt shop. Forrest Wellborn waited outside and kept watch as Michael Scott, Robert Springsteen, and Maurice Pierce entered the store. The theft went horribly wrong, though, and all of the females were killed. The allegations against Wellborn were dropped after the authorities made 2 attempts to indict him for the killings, but were unable to do so due to a lack of evidence connecting him to the crime. Charges against Maurice Pierce were also dropped due to a lack of evidence, which was extremely difficult for the police and the families of the victims to accept, because he was thought to be the mastermind behind the crime and the subsequent killings. Both Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott were found guilty of capital murder after separate trials for the yogurt store killings. The state of Texas had approved a new death penalty statute, making it feasible for Robert Springsteen to receive the death penalty even after the Supreme Court decision in 1972. But Michael Scott received a 99-year jail sentence. However, shortly after their trials, grave questions were presented that showed Springsteen and Scott might not have been guilty. In the beginning, there was no tangible proof connecting any of them to the crime. Both men added that their confessions had been forced upon them, and there was some proof to support their assertions. One of the detectives working on the case was reassigned after it was claimed that he had forced confessions in an unrelated case. Additionally, a picture of another Austin police officer aiming a gun at Scott's head during questioning surfaced. Both convictions were overturned by the courts after they determined that they had violated Springsteen and Scott's Sixth Amendment right to confront their accuser. This came 15 years after the yogurt shop killings were perpetrated. During the trial, Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen's confessions were used against each other, but their attorneys were never permitted to cross-examine the accuser. It was determined that their constitutional rights had been violated as a result. Later, in 2008, DNA testing on the evidence gathered from the crime scene revealed that neither Scott nor Springsteen's DNA, nor that of any other persons accused of the crime, matched the results. According to then Travis County District Attorney Rosemary Laneberg, the yogurt store murder was committed by Scott and Springsteen. But the men would not be charged again until the unknown man linked to the DNA evidence at the crime scene was located. The majority of law enforcement officials continue to believe that the original 4 suspects were the culprits, and that the DNA evidence implicating a 5th suspect was a fabrication. The 5th suspect argument, according to Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen's defense attorneys, is absurd, and they emphasized that no one ever brought up a 5th suspect before the inconvenient DNA results came in. According to some attorneys, investigators, family members, and armchair detectives who have studied this case, the killers of the teenagers may have been 2 unnamed customers who were at the yogurt store right before it closed. Although 52 customers who had come into the store on the day of the murders were reportedly questioned by the police, 2 individuals who witnesses said were present at closing time have never been located. 3 customers left the store shortly before it closed, and on their way out, they reportedly saw 2 males seated in a booth, and they didn't appear to be planning to leave anytime soon. Perhaps the men ordered a soft drink. When Jennifer and her coworker decided to close the store, at least one of the customers witnessed her lock the front door and post a close sign to prevent any additional customers from coming in. After all the other customers had left, only the 2 men in the booth remained. Witnesses gave the following descriptions of the persons of interest. One is around 5 foot 6 inches tall and has lighter hair, maybe like a dirty blonde. He seemed in his late 20s through early 30s. The second man is noted as being larger. Both were dressed in larger jackets, one of which was green, an army fatigue kind of looking jacket. The other had a black jacket. Neither of these males has been named as of yet. In the end, it is debatable if robbery was really the true motivation in this instance. It is difficult to believe that these killings were just the outcome of a robbery gone wrong, given the meager sum of money seized and the high level of violence. The likelihood that the murder was committed with sexual motivation and that the murderers only grabbed the money as an afterthought is substantially higher. It's possible that one of the girls knew the murderers, or it's possible that Sarah and Amy were followed from the mall to the yogurt store. Linking the DNA evidence discovered at the scene to the 2 male customers who were observed by witnesses lingering in the yogurt shop after closure could hold the key to solving this case. The 1991 murders at the yogurt business altered the city irrevocably. The murders were referred to by the then mayor as the crime where Austin lost its innocence. Residents of Austin began to doubt the safety of their community after the brutal and untimely deaths of 4 young girls who still had their entire lives ahead of them. The I Can't Believe It's yogurt store was converted into a nail salon, but a plaque honoring Jennifer Harbison, Sarah Harbison, Amy Ayers, and Elijah Thomas still stands in the parking lot beneath a large oak tree, serving as a reminder to anybody passing by that the murder case is yet to be solved, and that justice is yet to be served. The case of Christine Marie Paolia. Once a bright and promising student, Christine became embroiled in a web of tragedy and despair. Her story serves as a cautionary tale, highlighting the dangers of unaddressed mental health challenges, peer pressure, and the devastating impact of unresolved trauma. Christine Marie Pyler was born on March 31, 1986, on the peaceful shores of Long Island, New York. She was the second child of Lori and Charles, with her father working as a construction worker and her mother tending to the home. During her early years, was known to be a lively and sociable child, though she could also be shy at times. She shared a close and affectionate relationship with her doting father. Tragically, Christine's life was shattered when her father met an untimely demise in a construction accident, crushed by falling bricks. The sorrow continued to engulf her as she lost her grandfather and great-grandmother soon after. Bereft of her father's comforting presence, Christine's family struggled with grief. Her mother, Lori, grappling with the weight of her husband's death, found solace in drugs, spiraling into addiction. Unable to provide a stable environment, Lori lost custody of Christine and her older brother, who found refuge in the care of their grandparents. During her early school years, Christine was diagnosed with alopecia, a condition that caused her to lose her hair, eyebrows, and eyelashes. Each morning, she would find clumps of her hair scattered across her pillow, resulting in bald patches and eventually affecting her eyesight, leading to the loss of her eyebrows and eyelashes. Additionally, she also had poor vision, which required her to wear thick eyeglasses from kindergarten through middle school. Christine endured persistent taunts and bullying from her peers, a relentless assault that severely undermined her self-esteem. Isolated and despondent, she grappled with loneliness and depression. Deprived of the companionship of friends to share her trials and triumphs, her classmates struggled to understand the cause of her thinning hair, leading to persistent teasing and mocking. Despite her attempts to conceal the loss with wigs, often described as bulky and reminiscent of Halloween costumes, she found no respite from the ridicule, further adding to her distress. Her drawn-on eyebrows also drew attention, fueling the mockery she faced, even with the wigs. Her torment persisted, escalating to the point where other children would brazenly remove them. Each morning brought a sense of dread, as Christine faced the uncertainty of which classmate would inflict pain upon her that day, deepening her anguish and resentment towards school. After reuniting with her mother, who had overcome her addiction and remarried, Christine and her family left Long Island behind and relocated to Clear Lake City, Texas, a suburb of Houston. This new environment offered a fresh start for Christine and her siblings. Living in a predominantly upper-middle-class neighborhood and enrolling in Clear Lake High School, Christine prepared herself for the possibility of continued bullying, but fate had other plans. In a turn of events, Christine crossed paths with Rachel Carudis and Tiffany Rowell, two popular girls who welcomed her with open arms and extended their friendship to her. Embracing this opportunity, they took Christine under their wing and initiated a remarkable transformation. With their guidance, Christine underwent a physical makeover, learning how to dress and apply makeup while also acquiring more stylish wigs. This outward change mirrored a profound inner shift as Christine blossomed into a more confident, outgoing, and content individual. With Rachel and Tiffany by her side, Christine effortlessly became part of the social scene at her high school, where she was embraced and admired by her classmates. Her transformed demeanor, brimming with confidence and charm, led to her being crowned Miss Irresistible in 2003, marking a poignant milestone in her journey of self-exploration and personal growth. Rachel and Tiffany exemplified social grace, effortlessly navigating popularity while remaining genuinely kind and inclusive. Rachel, with her flowing locks and captivating smile, exuded intelligence and charisma, considering a future in the United States Air Force alongside her passion for art and childcare. Tiffany, adorned with her radiant smile and boundless generosity, harbored dreams of a career in social work, complemented by her talents as an actress and her vast circle of friends, including her closest confidant, Rachel. Although a year ahead in school, they welcomed Christine into their fold, fostering a deep bond of friendship together. The trio reveled in laughter and camaraderie, with Christine finding solace in their company to the extent of shedding her wig, a symbol of her newfound comfort and happiness, as observed by her delighted mother in the summer of 2003. Rachel and Tiffany, at the age of 18, began a new chapter by moving in together. Meanwhile, Christine, who was 17 years old, remained in her final year of high school and frequently visited the pair. It was during this time that Christine started a relationship with Christopher Lee Snyder, a 21-year-old man. However, Christine's mother, stepfather, as well as Rachel and Tiffany disapproved of the relationship. Their concerns were rooted in Christopher's history of drug abuse and his extensive criminal record, which included armed robbery. Despite the warnings from her loved ones, Christine continued the relationship, leading them to express their belief that she deserved better. Eventually, Christine found herself treading the same path as her boyfriend, succumbing to the allure of various drugs alongside Christopher. Christine's mother would later describe their relationship as toxic, revealing that Christopher not only isolated her daughter from loved ones, but also subjected her to alleged sexual assault. The couple's dynamic was plagued by intense jealousy, leading to frequent and heated conflicts. One particularly humiliating incident occurred when Christopher brazenly appeared at Christine's school, forcibly removing her wig in a deliberate attempt to shame her in front of classmates. Battling deep-seated insecurities and an unquenchable need for Christopher's attention, Christine became possessively jealous whenever he interacted with other girls. Christopher's family, recognizing the doomed nature of their relationship, pointed to the relentless arguments that plagued the couple. One such dispute escalated to the point where Christine spent an entire night on Christopher's front lawn, issuing threats of violence against his family. The police were frequently called to intervene in Christine's tumultuous relationship, and Christopher allegedly confided in his loved ones that he was truly frightened by only two things: the authorities and Christine herself. Despite the countless fights and clashes, Christine adamantly refused to sever ties with Christopher, a decision that would ultimately lead to devastating consequences. On the afternoon of July 18, 2003, Christopher and Christine visited Tiffany's home with the intention of stealing drugs and money. Tiffany was present with her boyfriend, Marcus Priscilla, his cousin, Adalbert Sanchez, and Tiffany's friend, Rachel. Allegedly, Marcus and his cousin were involved in drug dealing, leading Christopher and Christine to believe that drugs were stored in Tiffany's home. They planned to rob these drugs, and an argument between Christopher and Marcus ensued, resulting in the shooting of all four individuals in the home. Tiffany and Rachel sustained multiple gunshot wounds, including shots to the crotch, indicating a motive of sexual aggravation and jealousy. Adalbert Sanchez, Marcus' cousin, had recently moved to Clear Lake to escape violence, only to be killed in the tragedy shortly after his arrival. Rachel, critically wounded, tried to call for help but was suddenly found by Christine. In a shocking turn of events, Christine repeatedly hit Rachel on the head with the butt of her .38 caliber revolver until Rachel stopped moving. Christine later confessed to the police that Rachel had begged for her life, but Christine had chosen to kill her anyway. Less than an hour after he committed the murders, Christopher drove Christine to her job at Walgreens, where she worked at the makeup counter, and she acted as if nothing had happened. At around 6 p.m., a friend of Tiffany's, who was 18 years old, came to her house to join the group. When she got no response to her knocks, she noticed that Tiffany's and Marcus' vehicles were still parked outside. She became worried, entered the unlocked door, and was met with a horrific scene. Her friends were dead. She immediately fled the scene and called the police. The police characterized the crime scene as excessively brutal, earning the label overkill due to its horrific nature, initially suspecting it to be linked to drug trafficking. The victims, Tiffany and Rachel, had recently graduated and worked at a strip club, while Marcus was involved in selling cocaine. As a result, the police initially presumed that the crime was orchestrated by professionals connected to the drug trade, given that all the victims, except for Rachel, were killed in a manner consistent with execution-style murders. After the murders, the police launched an investigation, using descriptions of the suspects given by neighbors who had seen them walking to and from the home. The timeline of events showed that the murders took place around 3:25 p.m. Notably, Christine had already clocked into her job before 4 p.m. that same day. Although Christine appeared distressed in front of her family when the murders were announced, she supposedly didn't attend the victim's funeral due to depression. Christine took a significant step towards reforming her life by checking herself into rehab to overcome her drug addiction. Around the same time, Christopher was arrested in Kentucky and put behind bars for unrelated car theft charges, which ultimately led to the demise of their relationship. Nevertheless, the Clear Lake massacre remained a mystery, unsolved, for 3 long years despite concerted efforts to crack the case. In 2004, Christine checked herself into a rehab center in Gville, Texas, to overcome her addiction to drugs. It was there that she met Stanley Justin Rott, and a romance developed between them. After completing their treatment programs in 2005, they got married, vowing to stay drug-free together. They used the $360,000 trust fund left by Christine's biological father to start their new life, investing in an apartment. Christine's family had concerns about her marriage, particularly given Stanley's past of allegedly taking advantage of women financially. Christine and Stanley had made a conscious effort to stay away from drugs, but their happiness was short-lived. As the second anniversary of the murders approached in July 2005, the media's renewed focus on the case brought back painful memories for Christine. Rather than mourning the loss of her loved ones, she became increasingly upset by the released suspect sketches. This distress led her to confide in Stanley about her role in the murders, causing the couple to go into hiding in November 2005. Christine and Stanley were living in a San Antonio motel room where they spent the following 8 months regularly using heroin and cocaine. On July 8, 2006, the police received an anonymous tip about the murders. The informant claimed to have been in rehab with Christine and overheard her confessing her involvement in the crime to Stanley. Acting on this information, the police located Christine on July 19, 2006, and placed her under arrest. Stanley was also apprehended after the authorities discovered 70 vials of heroin in their room. While in custody, Stanley disclosed a startling revelation to the police. He alleged that Christine had confessed to him that after the shooting she encountered Rachel, who was still alive, and proceeded to kill her friend by beating her to death. Christine tried to shift the blame to her ex-boyfriend Christopher. During her questioning by the detectives, saying he came up with the plan to rob her friends, which went wrong. She told the police that all she wanted was to get drugs and money and didn't mean to hurt anyone. According to Christine, a fight broke out between Christopher and one of the men there, and shots were fired. She claimed Christopher forced her to pull the trigger by putting his hand over hers. The story that was told about the event was proven to be false by the coroner's reports, which showed that 2 different guns were used. Additionally, Christine admitted to going back to the scene to make sure the victims were dead, and she described a disturbing encounter with her friend Rachel, whom she claimed to have hit multiple times with a gun while Rachel was trying to call for help. Despite possessing this knowledge, Christine's defense attorneys maintained that she had never wielded a firearm and harbored no intention of causing harm. Meanwhile, Christopher, the other perpetrator in the crime, was released from jail. However, upon police entering his residence, they discovered that he had vanished without a trace, even before law enforcement arrived. Reportedly, he had become aware of the warrant for his arrest and the impending capital charges against him. Christopher had apparently moved to South Carolina and started dating a woman he met online. After finding out about the arrest warrant, he allegedly brought back pills and soda from South Carolina. Sadly, his body was later found lifeless in a nearby wooded area, and medical examiners confirmed that the cause of death was an overdose of pills. Inside the safe, police found 2 guns that were later matched to the murders. Christine's husband, Stanley, told the authorities that she had admitted to being involved in the murders, and he agreed to testify against her. His testimony was later confirmed to be true. Christine has never expressed remorse for the killings, nor provided any motive. However, psychiatrist Gail Saltz theorizes that her actions stemmed from envy and jealousy toward her more popular friends. Christopher's sister, Brandy, concurs that jealousy was likely the driving force behind the murders, reflecting on Christine's demeanor and remarking, "I remember her being intensely jealous." There must have been some underlying jealousy between Christine and Rachel. Christine was found guilty of 4 counts of capital murder on October 13, 2008. Despite being a juvenile offender at the time of the crimes, she was spared the death penalty and received a life sentence in prison. Despite filing multiple appeals regarding her sentence, all have been rejected. Christine is currently serving her sentence at the Christina Melton Crane Unit in Gatesville, Texas, and is scheduled for parole eligibility in July 2046. At the age of 60, Christine's downward spiral had devastating consequences, resulting in the loss of innocent lives and leaving the community stunned and grief-stricken. As the community came to terms with the tragedy, they rallied together to pay their respects to those who were taken too soon, and to offer each other comfort and support in the face of unbearable sorrow. The tragic outcome of Christine's story serves as a poignant reminder of the urgent need to prioritize mental health awareness and to provide timely support and intervention to individuals grappling with trauma and mental health problems. Nottingham, England, 2008. 21-year-old Joanna Whitten returned to the flat she shared with her partner of 3 years, 20-year-old Matthew Pike. She entered and turned on the light to see blood covering the floor of the living room. As she walked into the dining room, she found the body of her partner on the floor. He had been stabbed a shocking amount of times, something that could only be considered overkill. On the side of his computer were 3 letters written in blood, seemingly by Matthew himself. Soon after this, Joanna received a message on Facebook which read, "I'm sorry for having caused so much trouble lately. I hope you won't lose all your hope. We will be there for you." She knew immediately who had done this, and a huge manhunt was now underway. One that would travel overseas all the way to Limburg, just outside Frankfurt in Germany. 20-year-old Matthew Pike lived on North Sherwood Street, just above a pub in the city center of Nottingham. He had moved over from Suffolk after dropping out of his physics course at university, but in May plans to re-enroll at Nottingham Trent and was keen to finish his studies. His mother said he was modest, witty, and easygoing, with a huge love of technology. He spent a lot of his time on his computer building websites and talking on forums. On the internet, he went by the name Shade, and his girlfriend Joanna was known as Jojo. Matthew and Joanna spent a lot of time playing a Nintendo game called Advanced Wars, a chess-like turn-based strategy game centered around defeating opposing armies on different maps, with various mini-tasks in between. Matthew and Joanna often used the now inactive website, Advanced Wars Bunker. Another user that frequented the site as well was someone under the name Eagle the Lightning, and this user talked to Matthew and Joanna a lot. After Advanced Wars Bunker closed down, Matthew, Joanna, and a user by the name of Eggy created and began managing a site called Wars Central. Wars Central was focused on the Nintendo Wars series of games, Advanced Wars, Battalion Wars, Game Boy Wars, and Famicom Wars. It gave the community that loved the games a place to come together trading strategies and advice. They quickly developed a small but very loyal following. Eagle the Lightning followed Matthew and Joanna over to Wars Central, spending up to 8 hours a day on the forum. Before long, it became clear that this user had other motives for spending so much time on there. They had developed a fixation with Joanna that was escalating by the day. The user told people they thought her ginger hair made her more intelligent, and along with her love of gaming and technology, they believed Joanna was their perfect match. Over the coming weeks and months, the contact between this user and Matthew and Joanna became a constant and very exhausting thing. This user was soon discovered to be a German man, 21-year-old David Heis. Little was known about David to the other users, and he kept a lot of his life hidden and separate from his online world. What we do know is that he was the eldest of 2 children, and after his parents' divorce, he went to live with his grandparents. The relationship with his mother and father grew more and more strained, and they eventually stopped speaking almost altogether. He was described as very insular and introverted, with few friends, but he was an exceptional student, excelling in all his classes. He was desperate to attend university but was unable to afford it, and decided to join the military instead. Just 2 weeks after joining, he was discharged due to what the military described as not being mentally suitable. He started an apprenticeship at a textiles company, and when he wasn't doing that, he was guaranteed to be on Wars Central. He added Joanna on Facebook, totaling his number of friends to 15. The other 14 were all from different parts of the world, presumably being other people he had met online. He would spend a lot of time going through Joanna's profile and messaging her via any outlet he could, sometimes hundreds of times a day. He soon announced his love for her, and despite Matthew being very much in the picture, he only became more blatant with his feelings. He sent her a Facebook message that read, "I love you, Jojo, more than anything else in my life. I shouldn't, but I can't help it, and to be honest, it's a great feeling. You're my first thought when I wake up and the last one when I go to sleep." Joanna repeatedly ignored his messages and tried not to worry about it too much, thinking the obsession would soon wear off. After all, David was hundreds of miles away in a different country, and Joanna and Matthew were always very careful and private about their personal lives. Joanna said she never worried about anyone finding out where they lived, as it was not information they revealed or ever put out there on any platform. But in June of 2008, Matthew and Joanna went on a short holiday. To their shock, they arrived back at their flat to find David Heis standing outside the front door waiting for them. Conveniently, he said he had no money with him and nowhere to stay. When they asked him how he found out where they'd lived, He claimed Joanna had once posted it on her Facebook page, something which Joanna couldn't ever remember or imagine doing. Understandably unnerved by this, Joanna started ringing around some local hostels to try and book him somewhere to stay. But when they had no luck, David insisted he just stay with them. He slept on the floor in their room in a sleeping bag. Joanna recalled not sleeping that night, as every time she looked over, he was wide awake and staring at her. David stayed with them for 3 days before Joanna convinced him to head off and meet some more of his online friends while he was in the UK. After 3 weeks of traveling around, he finally returned to Germany. Matthew, who had now reached his limits, contacted him and said, "I hate you for ever laying eyes on the girl I've dedicated my life to. I hate you for your desperation." Matthew then took to the War Central forum and put out a post called "The 19 Reasons Why I Hate David Heis." David was humiliated and infuriated, and despite his attempts to change people's minds, other users began distancing themselves from him too. Just weeks later, David took his uncle's car to drive to the couple's home again. While he was traveling down the motorway, he collided with a truck. This was no deterrent, however, and as soon as he was deemed fit to leave the hospital, he headed over to the flat, just as he had planned. Enough was enough, and the couple sent him away. They knew they had to cut him off completely and blocked him from accessing the Ward Central forum. Many of the users cut off contact with him as well. Joanna emailed the troubling David urging him to seek help and go and talk to a therapist. David replied, "Joe, one day I will break my promise and come back to Nottingham and offer you a knife or something and tell you to kill me because I don't want to live without you." For the next 2 months, the shaken pair heard nothing from David Heis. But in early September, Matthew received an email from him. It read, "There's something I would like to give to you. I'm not going to say what it is though. You will love it." On September 18th, 2008, David's obsession would take its darkest turn yet. He packed some worn clothes, some gardening gloves, and a knife before boarding a plane from Germany to England via Amsterdam, his 3rd trip in 3 months. When he arrived, he stayed in the station for a while looking for a tram to get. When he realized they were no longer running, he proceeded to walk through the town at 1 a.m. When he reached North Sherwood Street, he got onto the roof of the couple's flat and slept behind an air conditioning unit all night. That same evening, Joanna and Matthew celebrated their 3-year anniversary. At 6:55 a.m., David watched Joanna leave for work before forcing his way into the flat. He launched a savage and prolonged attack on Matthew, stabbing him a total of 86 times. It was clear from the location of the blood that he had chased Matthew around the flat for a while, with Matthew stumbling into walls and doors as he had tried to escape. After this, he threw some clothes and belongings around the flats, presumably attempting to make it look like a burglary, before he fled the area, leaving Matthew for dead. In Matthew's final moments, he crawled over to his computer and wrote DAV, the first 3 letters of David's name, in his own blood on the side of the monitor. A truly heartbreaking thought, but Matthew's immense determination to identify David and tell people what had happened showcased his strength until the very end. He succumbed to his numerous injuries shortly thereafter. Before catching his 1:20 p.m. flight, David walked up and down the street, dumping things in different bins. When analyzing the CCTV, it was clear that David was struggling to walk, partly due to a cut on his leg that had happened during the fight, and partly because the shoes he was determined to be wearing in the clip weren't his. His own shoes were covered in blood, and without a spare pair, he had taken Matthew's, which were a few sizes too small. He also disposed of the knife, which was never found, before getting on a flight home, just 16 hours after landing in the United Kingdom. It appeared that David had wanted to make the murder look like Matthew had taken his own life. In an attempt to give himself an alibi, he asked his sister to log on to some sites under his Eagle the Lightning username. In his suitcase were 2 suicide notes, one for him and one that was made to look like Matthew had written it. But for whatever reason, he didn't leave any notes at the scene. Police theorized that due to how bloody and violent the scene was simply no way that anyone would believe Matthew could have done that to himself. There was no other possible suspect, and police began corresponding with the authorities in Lindbergh to track down David Heis. Joanna had given them a huge amount of information, including the car crash he was in while driving to their home. As the authorities had been involved in this, His address was soon located. He was arrested 4 days later and stayed in custody awaiting extradition to the United Kingdom. In a final, callous act of desperation, he wrote a letter to Joanna from prison, telling her he hoped they could be together when everything was over. David quickly admitted to killing Matthew, claiming self-defense, but police had numerous amounts of evidence that pointed to it being very much a premeditated killing. A search of his house showed the suitcase that he was seen traveling with, and inside it was the pair of bloody gardening gloves he had worn that day. During David's trial, he stuck to his story. Matthew was the aggressor, and David had stabbed him to defend himself. He said that he had traveled to England to confront Matthew and Joanna after they had started abusing him online. He said that he wanted to scare Matthew in the hopes that it would stop, what he referred to as constant hostilities. He charged at me. I was trying to push his arms away so they wouldn't make contact with me. He lost the knife when it fell to the floor near the table. He tried to crawl towards it, but I tried to prevent it by sitting on him. After a few seconds, I got hold of it. He started kicking me in the back and he was looking at me angrily. I was lucky that I was still alive. I don't know if it was adrenaline, but I managed to get my arm away and then I stabbed him. The prosecution said this was totally convoluted, and the placement of blood at the scene, as well as the fact that apart from the small cut, David had no injuries, told a very clear and different story. Mr. Justice Keith told David, "The fact your motive for the murder was so bizarre doesn't make your killing of Matthew any less serious. The tragedy is that you are unable to cope with rejection." In May 2009, David Heis was found guilty of the murder of Matthew Pike and was given a life sentence with the minimum term of 18 years that he must serve before he can be considered for parole. None of David Heis's family were present for the trial. Matthew's family issued a statement. "We will never truly come to terms with what happened to Matthew that morning. While we have wanted justice throughout the course of this trial, all we really want is Matthew back with us. There will always be a massive part of our family missing, and not a day goes by without us thinking about Matthew and what might have been. It's not fair that we should all have to live like this for the rest of our lives because of one man's actions. He has taken a wonderful, caring, loving young man from all of us. We hope this verdict will give us some kind of closure so that we can try and move on with our lives. But that is easier said than done." Joanna and Eggy continued running Wars Central for a while, where they made a tribute page for Matthew, which was always flooded with people sharing their memories and love for him. They went on to create Wars Wiki, the encyclopedia for all Nintendo Wars games. It was made as a dedication and a tribute to Matthew Pike. The case of Paige Bergfeld. The discovery of Paige Bergfeld's car marked the beginning of a perplexing and mysterious story that unfolded on the first Sunday of July 2007. On that day, a red Ford Focus belonging to the missing Paige was discovered. However, the location where the car was found and its condition raised significant questions and suspicions. The vehicle was situated in a remote area Paige rarely visited. Moreover, was completely engulfed in flames, suggesting that something alarming and unusual had occurred. The county district attorney scrutinized the case closely. His preliminary findings indicated the fire surrounding the car was intentional. This conclusion was corroborated by the fact that nothing else had burned in the vicinity. The strange incident involving Paige Bergfeld's car turned out to be just the beginning of an even more intricate story. June 28, 2007. Is a date forever etched in the memories of Paige's family and friends. On that ordinary day, Paige left her 3 children with a friend, Carol Lindholm, early in the morning. Everything seemed normal. No one anticipated trouble or imagined what was soon to transpire. Paige, a responsible mother, always called or came to pick up her children on time. However, when Paige did not return to pick up her children, friends and relatives tried contacting her, but received no response. 8-year-old Jazz, her eldest child, took initiative in searching for his missing mother. After sending several messages to her phone without any reply, Jazz insisted on searching with Carol. They went to the police station, where Jazz reported his mom hadn't returned for him. The community was shocked by her mysterious disappearance, and many were eager to assist in her search. Consequently, a massive public search operation commenced to bring this young woman back to her children and loved ones. That same day, Frank Bergfeld, Paige's father, received a call from an official with the sheriff's department. The message was brief and shocking. His daughter had disappeared. Frank quickly realized something serious was amiss. He attempted to contact Paige, but there was no response. Left with no other option, Frank called his eldest son, Craig, who lived on the opposite side of the country. Without a moment's hesitation, Craig purchased a one-way ticket and arrived in town ready to assist in the search for his sister. Family and friends combined efforts with police and volunteers to initiate a massive search operation. People from various neighborhoods gathered to look for Paige, meticulously combing the surrounding areas and checking every possible corner, where any trace of her could be found. The police began by examining Paige's history with her loved ones to determine if they had any involvement in her disappearance. Naturally, authorities directed their attention to Paige's relationship with her first husband, Howard Bigler. Paige and Howard's relationship traced back to her high school years. After graduating from high school, Paige enrolled in the nursing program at the University of Florida, where she met a young man named Howard Bigler. Their mutual affection led them to start dating. Upon successfully obtaining her nursing degree, Paige returned to Colorado, where she continued living with her family. In 1995, after some time passed, she married Howard Bigler. At first glance, they appeared as a happy couple. They shared numerous interests and views on life. Nonetheless, there was one significant rift. Paige desired to have children and start a family, while Howard did not share this aspiration. This fundamental disagreement sparked several arguments and many discussions. Attempts at compromise failed repeatedly. Thus, in 1997, they decided it best to part ways through divorce. Despite this separation, their bond remained strong enough that the former spouses continued being friends. Later on, Paige married Rob Dixon, but that marriage too ended in divorce. Following her divorce from Rob, Paige reconnected with Howard once more. Howard claimed he was among the last individuals to see Paige alive on the 28th of that month. They met up in Eagle County, Colorado. It was due to personal business. There, they spent Thursday together. The former spouses then returned to their cities. Howard confirmed that they continued to communicate by phone after the meeting. Upon learning of Paige's disappearance, Howard immediately contacted emergency services. While speaking to the operator, he expressed his concern and belief that something terrible had happened to Paige. The phone recording was corroborated by cell tower data showing that on the day Paige disappeared, Howard was in the Denver, Colorado area, which is several hours away from where she vanished. This gave police officers reason to remove Howard from the list of suspects. Police began to examine Paige's relationship with her second husband, Rob Dixon, and quickly uncovered many events that raised questions and warranted further investigation. It turned out that during their marriage, Paige had reported Rob to the police twice for harassment. After her divorce from her first husband, Paige took a job at a strip club in Denver, where she met Rob Dixon. The man was wealthy and had inherited a large fortune through his family's business. Having fallen in love with each other, Paige and Rob did not hesitate and entered into marriage in 1998. The family settled in a luxurious home in Colorado, where Paige fulfilled her dream of becoming a mother. A few years later, the couple had 3 children who became the most important thing in her life. The first years of marriage seemed happy as Paige and Rob were immersed in a world of luxury, leading a well-to-do lifestyle. However, and quite suddenly, things began to fall apart due to financial difficulties Rob faced. Some of his family's businesses had serious problems, and as a result, the economic situation in the family deteriorated so much that Rob was forced to file for bankruptcy. The financial collapse led to a profound family crisis. By 2004, tensions had escalated so that Paige contacted emergency services twice. The first time, she reported that Rob had threatened to kill her and their children, but the time the police arrived, both claimed to have resolved their issues on their own. A year later, another incident occurred that was markedly different. Paige reported Rob for assault, claiming he hit her while she was holding their youngest child. This time, Rob was arrested and charged with third-degree assault. He eventually pleaded guilty to 1 count of molestation, but the trial was dismissed and Rob avoided jail time. The relationship between husband and wife continued deteriorating, leading them to separate. Rob subsequently moved to Pennsylvania. Investigators interviewed him to establish his alibi for the day Paige disappeared. Rob asserted he was at home and could not have harmed Paige. Despite the separation, Rob joined the search effort and was very active in trying to find Paige. Investigating officers left no stone unturned in their quest to uncover clues that might unravel this mysterious case and locate the missing mother. One of the initial steps involved a meticulous examination of Paige's car. Since arson is often used to destroy potential evidence, experts thoroughly inspected the vehicle and discovered valuable information. For instance, the driver's seat had been pushed back as far as it would go, suggesting that a tall man had driven it last. Given Paige's shorter stature, she couldn't have reached the pedals from that position. In addition, they found Paige's notebook in the trunk of the car, with several pages torn out, covering June 26th through June 29th. A few days after a burning car was discovered, a driver stopped on a highway southeast of town due to tire problems. A nearby checkbook caught his eye. He promptly reported it to the authorities. As they investigated that section of the road, they also found medical records, insurance cards, and other items belonging to Paige. Sergeant Weiler noticed that several pages from the checkbook had been torn out, and the items were scattered over a considerable distance. Most significantly, a business card found at the scene became key to revisiting the investigation. It was revealed that Paige led a secret life unknown to her loved ones. The business card indicated she worked as son to the alias Carrie. This discovery challenged all previous assumptions about Paige Bergfeld's disappearance. From that point forward, police officers faced previously unimaginable circumstances. After her divorce, Paige realized she needed to work hard and earn enough to provide for her children and meet their needs. She's starting a children's clothing business while simultaneously teaching dance lessons and selling kitchen supplies at a company. Despite her busy schedule, Paige always made time for her children, attended parent-teacher association meetings, and stayed active in school groups. However, this new discovery by the police upended everything known before. It turned out she had been living a completely secret life, with another phone used exclusively for professional activities related to her job as an escort. This phone became essential in unraveling the complex mystery that even Paige's close friends and family couldn't have imagined. Investigators were now faced with many questions. Why did such a devoted mother and successful businesswoman decide to live this double life? How was this secret profession connected to her disappearance? All these queries became priority in the investigation, adding layers of complexity and intrigue. Using the cell phone found in Paige's car, detectives accessed a list of contacts and calls made and received in the hours leading up to her disappearance. The last call from that phone was made on June 28th around 9 p.m. After analyzing this information, 7 individuals were identified as suspects. One of them was Lester Ralph Jones. Investigators paid special attention to Jones due to his criminal history, which included violence against women and kidnapping. For one incident, he served 5 years in prison. But that wasn't that alerted the police. A white car matching the description given by Carol Paige's friend also raised suspicions. Carol shared crucial details with detectives. She recounted a day when Paige approached her car and noticed another white car blocking her driveway. Annoyed, she got behind the wheel to maneuver out, but ended up colliding with the other vehicle. The unknown driver immediately fled the scene. With this information, investigators speculated that Lester might have been obsessed with Paige and possibly following her. Further digging revealed that Lester Jones had tried to schedule an appointment with Paige the day before she disappeared. When questioned, Lester denied knowing anything about Paige's disappearance and provided fingerprints and DNA samples. However, many suspicious items were found in his home. A disposable cell phone, men's wigs, a sheet with an escort services phone number, and women's lingerie in various sizes. Particular attention was given to the disposable cell phone found at Lester's residence. Analysis of call records from Paige's cell phone indicated that on the day she went missing, someone tried contacting her multiple times from an unregistered number. When questioned further, Lester claimed he didn't own a second cell phone, indicating he lied to police. Police determined that the phone had been purchased at a supermarket on North Avenue. store video footage confirmed Lester was indeed the purchaser of that disposable cell phone. When he was shown the video footage, he refused to acknowledge that was him. As a result of all this, Lester Jones became the prime suspect in Paige's disappearance. With no concrete evidence pointing to his guilt, the police to follow him and attempted to find Paige's body in order to have enough evidence to press charges. The case was put on hold for several years. Meanwhile, the young woman's family and loved ones were at a loss for grief. No one knew what had happened to the young mother, and the search seemed hopeless. As time went on, the hope that Paige would be found alive was dwindling. That all changed in 2012, when a hiker accidentally stumbled upon human remains in a ravine among rocks and bushes in Delta County. The find was discovered very close to the road, where Paige's personal belongings had been found 5 years earlier. Experts who arrived on the scene were almost certain that it was the body of the young mother. The experts ran a DNA test, and the results confirmed that it was Paige. She was found, but it was a grisly end to her story. The exact cause of death could not be determined due to the condition of the body. However, it was found that Paige had been struck many times as several of her bones were broken, particularly the bones in her face. As a result, it was determined that she died from injuries sustained during the beating. This information added to the horrific drama of the story. Paige's body was underground, and due to years of soil erosion ended up on the surface. This may explain why she was not discovered earlier. Lester Ralph Jones' case came to a halt for several years after Paige's remains were discovered. In November 2014, he was charged with kidnapping, first-degree murder, and second-degree murder. However, the trial didn't begin until July 2016 and lasted 22 days. Prosecutors argued that Lester, who already had a history of violence against women, was frustrated at not being able to see Paige after trying to get an appointment with her. The main witness for the prosecution was Lester's ex-wife Lisa. She recounted how he kidnapped and threatened to kill her at gunpoint in the late 1990s. Lisa Lester found it difficult to come to terms with her decision to end the relationship on multiple occasions. Once, he attacked the couple gun in hand. Tragically, Lisa's partner was shot in the head. A month later, Lester threatened her again, telling her she might end up at the bottom of a lake. Fortunately, Lisa managed to escape and contacted the police. This led to Lester's arrest on charges of kidnapping and assault. Lester's defense attorneys contended that the police had detained an innocent man. They suggested that other clients of Paige could have had motives for the crime. However, they did not present convincing evidence linking others to the murder. Lester's current spouse also testified before the jury. Despite knowing he used an escort service, she did not abandon him because of her faith. Nonetheless, she didn't provide him an alibi and even identified him from a surveillance video at a supermarket where he bought a disposable phone on September 9, 2016. The jury couldn't reach a unanimous verdict in the first trial, leading it to be declared a mistrial. However, the district attorney was firm in believing Lester's guilt and didn't give up. Over several days, he diligently re-examined all evidence. On November 21, 2016, after thoroughly reviewing all of it, the jury reached a verdict. Lester was found guilty of all charges related to Paige's death. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without parole. Although the defense appealed this sentence, an appeals court panel upheld it in June 2022 and confirmed Lester's guilt. Paige's final farewell took place on April 28, 2012. Her obituary described her as a beautiful and radiant woman whose smile could be compared to the sun. Her tragic loss deeply affected her family and friends. Her 3 children were orphaned and lost their main support and encouragement. Paige's case drew public attention and lasted many years. Nevertheless, law enforcement and relatives persevered tirelessly until justice was finally served. Lester Ralph Jones was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Now he won't be able to harm anyone else. Paige's story underscores why it's vital to fight for justice, regardless of how long it takes or how much effort is required. Her memory will forever linger in the hearts of those who knew and loved her. This case takes us to North Webster, Indiana. In 1975, The little town of North Webster was known to be quiet, peaceful, and safe. It was a place where residents often kept their doors unlocked. Back then, parents would often give their children the freedom to go ride bikes up and down the traffic-free streets. North Webster was a community where everyone knew each other, and people spent hours hanging out on their front porches. But when Laurel Mitchell was murdered, the news of her death sent shockwaves throughout the small town, and residents were faced with the unsettling possibility that the killer could be someone they knew. The small lake community of North Webster had never before seen a crime like the 1975 murder of Laurel Jean Mitchell. Even today, with the case solved, the community still remembers the case. Laurel Jean Mitchell was born on the 24th of May, 1958 to Richard Dick Mitchell and Wilma Mae Mitchell in Whitley County, Indiana. At the time of Laurel's murder, Dick Mitchell was a well-known public figure in North Webster. He was a U.S. Marine Corps veteran. On the other hand, Laurel's mother, Wilma Mitchell, operated the North Webster Food Pantry at Augsburgers for several years. Apart from Laurel, Dick and Wilmer had two more children named Bruce and Sarah, who were 18 and 12 respectively. Laurel and her siblings had a tight-knit bond despite the occasional siblings' rivalry. Laurel grew up to become a loved personality in North Webster. Her friendly nature and heartwarming smile won over the hearts of everyone she met. She often went out of her way to make other people around her happy and feel loved. Laurel had many talents, in which one of them was her love for singing. This made her join the local church choir. Her love for music did not stop there. She was a good dancer who brushed up her skills by taking dance lessons at a local studio. She found a sense of accomplishment in singing and dancing. By the age of 17, Laurel Mitchell was set to begin her senior year in Wawasee High School. Before the school year began, she decided to take up a job at the Cokesbury Inn, a small restaurant in Epworth Forest, located on the shores of Webster Lake. For her, taking up a job at the restaurant means having the opportunity to gather experience and add value to her life, while she makes a couple of extra bucks. On the 6th of August, 1975, the Mitchells family started their day unaware that a tragedy awaits them by the end of the day. Laurel, Sarah, and a friend of Laurel who stays with them, woke up to tackle their morning chores. Bruce, the oldest child and the only son, was not around at the time because he was already married and was serving in the Army in California. Dick and Wilmer got ready for work and bade their daughters goodbye as they headed out to their respective workplace. Later that afternoon, Laurel, who was on a night shift, also headed to work with plans of meeting up with her friends at Adventureland when her shift was over. Oftentimes when she works the night shift, either her mom or dad would pick her up after work. But on the 6th of August, 1975, since she had plans to meet up with her friends, she didn't see the need for her parents to come pick her up. Around 10 p.m., Laurel Mitchell began to wrap up her work for the day, and at exactly 10:15 p.m., she left her workplace and headed out to Adventureland, a once popular amusement park about half a mile away from the restaurant where she worked. On her way there, she passed by a classmate who waved at her as she walked by the entrance to the Epworth Forest, and that appeared to have been the last time Laurel was seen alive. She never made it to Adventureland. Neither her friends nor family knew she was missing or in danger. Her parents believed she was with her friends at Adventureland, when in reality, her friends for some reason had changed location and gone to the county fair that evening. Thinking that Laurel had just gone home after work, the midnight curfew for the Mitchells family passed, and Laurel's family became worried because Laurel had not come back home. They waited through the night, checking the door to see if she would walk in, but Laurel never did. In the early hours of August 7th, 1975, at exactly 4:16 a.m., Dick and Wilma Mitchell called the police to report their daughter missing. Neighbors, friends, and the police started out for a search, but Laurel couldn't be found in all the areas they looked for her. However, few hours later, at around 10:30 a.m., a man named Glenn Dixon and his son, Hager Dixon, were about to start fishing in the Elkhart River near Diamond Lake Road Bridge in Noble County when they found a dead body floating in the water. The police were called to the crime scene, and the body was quickly identified to be Laurel Mitchell. The news of Laurel's death shattered her family and the whole community of North Webster, who saw Laurel as a kind, decent, and beautiful person. Laurel was described as smart, boisterous, and motherly, often doting on the neighborhood children. Due to her involvement in the local church choir group, dance classes, and other community events, she was a well-known face in the small town of North Webster. And this was why residents in North Webster were shocked. They wondered who could kill such a sweet girl who wouldn't hurt a fly. On the day Laurel's body was discovered, Dr. Peel Sonk from the Goshen General Hospital in Goshen, Elkhart County, Indiana, performed an autopsy on her. The cause of Laurel's death was determined to be drowning. She showed no obvious signs of trauma aside from several bruises on her hands and shoulder. She was said to have resisted her attacker, fighting for her life. When Laurel was discovered, she was fully clothed, however. The autopsy determined that she had been sexually assaulted. The police ruled the case to be homicide and the search for Laurel's killer began. Indiana State Police, along with the Kosciuszko County Sheriff's Department, the Noble County Sheriff's Department, and the Noble County Coroner's Office opened an investigation into Mitchell's death. Investigators spent thousands of hours trying to solve her murder. They followed every lead. They interviewed neighbors who lived around the crime scene. A woman named Catherine Flynn, who lived at the area at the time of Laurel's murder, told the police that around 10 p.m. on the 6th of August, 1975, that she heard a loud car turn around next door. She said she heard voices say, "Let's get," or "Let's get her." Another resident with the name Frank Overmere told investigators he also heard a loud vehicle in the neighborhood, possibly an Oldsmobile. The police followed these leads and tried all they could, but the killer of Laurel could not be found. Over the next 5 decades, numerous detectives continued to work on her case. With no improved DNA technology in the 1970s, the Laurel Mitchell's case was gradually getting cold. After waiting for years to get answers, sadly, Dick and Wilmer Mitchell couldn't cheat nature as they passed away from natural causes at the age of 82 in 2012. However, despite the case growing colder by the day, Laurel's sister Sarah Mitchell never gave up hope of finding answers. Every year she would appeal to the media to once again cover her sister's story and always maintain contact with Detective Kevin Smith, who was assigned to Laurel's case. During one of her chats with the detective, Sarah mentioned that a family friend had told her a small band from Delphi, Indiana called Celebrate the Sun, consisting of several boys and girls around the ages of 16 to 20, had played a show that evening at the Cokesbury Inn and had left around the same time Laurel was last seen alive. The family friend also mentioned seeing the same group at the fire station later that evening. He described seeing a woman having a panic attack and hyperventilating outside of the fire station. He said the woman was accompanied by a group of guys all around the ages of 16 to 20 who were trying to calm her down. The detective then told Sarah that this tip had never been reported and felt it was worth investigating. Investigators then tracked down the members of the band. It was, however, discovered that they were a performing church group who were not from Delphi and had never stopped at the fire station that evening. The case went cold again, but in June 2013, a year after Laurel's parents died, Renee Sexton, a Florida woman who was 16 years old and living in Noble County in 1975, contacted the county sheriff's department to inform them that she had gone on a date with a man called John Wayne Lefman, and as he was driving her back home, he admitted his involvement in a crime that he committed with his friend, Fred Bandy. John Wayne Lefman had told the woman details that were consistent with the police findings when Laurel's body was found, including the anatomical findings from the autopsy results. In 2014, Bill McDonald, who was a high school sophomore at the time of Laurel's murder, told police that he socialized with a man named Fred Bandy while in high school, and that Fred Bandy told him after Laurel Mitchell's murder that he had committed the crime and also provided details of the location where her body was found. In 2019, another man told the police that he and Bill McDonald had attended a high school party with Fred Bandy, John Wayne Leafman, and others. When Mitchell's murder came up, Fred Bandy then stated that he and John Wayne Leafman committed the crime of killing Laurel Mitchell together. These multiple confessions were what the investigators needed to pursue the case vigorously once again. After the last witness came forward with the same information, in 2019, Laurel Mitchell's clothes and other evidence preserved from the crime scene in 1975 where he submitted for DNA testing at the Indiana State Police Laboratory. The forensics developed a profile for a possible suspect. 3 suspects who were initially on the list of the investigators were eliminated and attention was shifted to Fred Bandy for a buccal swab. On December 5, 2022, authorities visited Fred Bandy at his residence, explaining to him the reason they were there and asking for a sample of his DNA. Surprisingly, Fred Bandy did not put up a fight. He voluntarily provided the DNA sample. Fred Bandy's buccal swab was then taken to the lab for testing, and the results showed that Fred Bandy is more likely to be the contributor of the DNA found in Laurel Jane Mitchell's clothing than any other unknown person. A search warrant on Fred Bandy's home was issued, and during the search, investigators later discovered that Fred Bandy had a 1971 Oldsmobile. In 1975, it is believed that the Oldsmobile was used by him and John Wayne Lefman to bring Mitchell to the Mallard Roost public access site in Noble County, where they forcibly removed her from the vehicle and deliberately drowned her. Additionally, information from the Indiana court database shows that Fred Bandy is a twice-convicted child molester, deemed a sexually violent predator in Elkhart County. On Monday, February 6, 2023, 47 years and 6 months after her death, the Indiana State Police and the Noble County Sheriff's Department arrested Fred Bandy and John Wayne Leibel in their respective homes and charged them with the murder of Laurel G. Mitchell. Both suspects are being held in the Noble County Jail without bond. Following the arrest of Laurel's killers, her sister, Sarah Nicely Mitchell, said, "They basically blew up my family. For a lot of years, it was rage. If I could have killed them myself, I would have. If they gave them the electric chair, I would have thrown the switch. I'm glad they are going to be punished, that they won't be able to hurt anyone else. But she's still dead." She remembered her sister and said, "She was just a good, kind, decent person. She was an awesome person. Wherever she went, she had to take me with her. That wasn't fun for her, but it was for me. She didn't deserve this. She was just in the wrong place at the wrong time." Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.